How can we use blockchain technology for good? Which direction are we going to take this in? And how are we going to do it? How are we going to make this more sustainable, effective, and measurable? So we have some incredible speakers for you today. I encourage you to stay and check them out. Leading the discussion today is a dear friend of mine. Her name's Brianne Butler. She is arguably the co-founder of the largest decentralized movement in the world. It's called the Women's March. Give a big round warm of applause for Brianne, who's coming up right now. Joining the conversation, we also have Ingrid LaFleur. She is here from Chicago. She is, Detroit. How could I mess that up? I know she's here from Detroit. Also, Brianne is from Detroit, so we have some Detroit love on stage. Ingrid is one of the co-founders of EOS Detroit, and she is currently the chief community officer. That's what I thought. Okay, she's also an activist and an artist. We also are going to bring to the stage Sloan Trigman. She has about 20 different titles. I'm not sure which one to announce right now, but once she gets up here, you'll understand. We also have Fu Styles here, founder, CEO of many different organizations. The one I want to mention right now is the Women in Blockchain Foundation that you started. So I'm going to pass it off to you ladies. Here you go, Brianne.
Thank you. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
I feel like I've talked to a lot of you on Telegram, but never actually met you. So thank you so much for being here and listening to this discussion. I'm super excited. Again, like as a founder of one of the largest decentralized movements right now, we're constantly trying to figure out how we can push ourselves and continue to do our work in the most impactful way possible. And when I came into the blockchain space, I saw so much potential, and I saw how this could really solve a lot of our problems. So I'm excited to have this discussion and do it more of like a fireside chat where we can all just collaborate and talk about what we're working on and how we really do believe that blockchain can truly create sustainable impact. So I want to start out with Fu. So I know that you are a founder of the Women in Blockchain Foundation. Do you want to tell us more about that?
Actually, I wanted to have the story shared with you specifically because I started it literally right after the Women's March in January. So here in LA, so I've been to all the women's marches. I know there've only been two.
There'll be another one, don't worry.
But I was featured on Fox television with a couple of actresses, and I was formerly in the entertainment industry, so I talked about my experience in the entertainment industry, but also my experience as a founder of a virtual reality company and an AR company as well, and having been the only woman in the room all the time. And how I was not comfortable with that. I wanted more women in the space. So having gone into the blockchain space, I thought, oh, how am I going to do something about it? Just start something. So that's how it came about. So it's so it's all because of you.
Oh my God. Well, honestly, it's weird because like I feel like watching a lot of the content you were putting out, especially on the Telegram group, that really helped me understand more about the space. So like you've equally helped me out just as much. Like I oftentimes refer to you and what's being discussed and talked about, and I feel like you're really good too at pointing, hey, this is happening, join this group, this event's happening, so that's also really helpful.
Yeah, and what I really wanted to point out is that there were so many women groups, but we wanted to really be inclusive and talk about inclusion and diversity, so we were adding a lot of men and inviting men to things because we can't be inclusive without including everybody.
Right.
So it's been a really great place for conversations actually that have happened inside the Telegram group, that have happened, I think you saw some between men and women who were not feeling safe about what was happening in the blockchain space, and they aired it out in the public forum, and I thought that was a really great way to get it all out there, because there's a lot of hurt and trauma.
A lot of trauma.
From women, and people of color, and for especially in the tech space and the Me Too movement and all the things that have happened. And so it was great to provide a safe forum for everyone to discuss that. So thank you.
Now, Ingrid, my homegirl from Detroit. Ingrid's also from Detroit. Now, you also ran for mayor in Detroit, which is amazing. More women running for office, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself. And you're a big part of EOS, or is it EOS Detroit?
Yes, EOS Detroit. Yes, I'm the Chief Community Officer. I came to blockchain technology because during my run for mayor, I was looking at ways to tackle our 64% poverty rate in Detroit if you are including the working poor. So I was thinking a universal basic income would be one logical step, but I was also thinking about Detroit creating its own token, its own crypto, to basically create that universal basic income, and that's what I proposed, and it kind of changed my life. And it's been a really interesting ride. As Chief Community Officer, I think very intentionally about very specific communities. Today we've been talking about community, but we haven't really been specific about different types of communities. And I focus on Detroit because we are creating an app for Detroit that will serve the rest of the world. But our starting point is Detroit, and we really, Detroit is 85% black, it's majority of color. So these are communities of people who are traditionally marginalized within the tech space, within the finance space. There's a lot of trauma around finance and people of color, financial institutions being very oppressive. So my work is really thinking about how do we responsibly enter different communities that are traditionally marginalized. How do we teach the tech? How do we make it relevant to their lives? So I create panel discussions that sometimes talk about blockchain technology, sometimes just really unpacking what does it mean to create an alternative economy? What does it mean to redefine value? And these conversations, I've learned so much about what Detroiters actually want, and they really want to know, can blockchain technology stop the school to prison pipeline? Can it really address some of the hard-hitting issues that we're facing on the ground every day? And that's tough. That's a tough space to be in, but I'm really enjoying the challenge.
I love that. You know, it's so needed in Detroit. And hi.
What's up?
Hi, Sloan.
Hey.
So, Sloan, you talk a lot about, I was reading up on you, and you talk a lot about ROI, but instead of return on investment, it's return on intentionality. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I'm so excited to be here. I'm someone who works extremely deeply, intensely in a very, very, very dirty, muddy, clogged background of policymaking and auditing. So being here today talking about something that's critical is very fun for me. So I, a few years ago, slingshot super deep into what my background was intended to be, which was public representation, national and geopolitical security. I won't bore you guys on that, just it's a lot of cool tech, a lot of accountable data, and a lot of readiness and use for it. And I started, there was a lot that went into going back into that slingshot of that particular focus, but I started seeing on a global level where we were in the 20th century, which are like countries, a lot of war, cities, human rights. Like I just started trying to look at the 20th century, and I saw how important currency was, how important the institution of money was, and how there were still a lot of problems on our planet. So I started to then slingshot farther than Earth, and I thought, okay, what could we be in the 21st century because we're almost at the end of 18 years of it, and there's still the 20th century problems locked in ROI investment, which was making the world move. So when I started getting into policy development, designing strategies and readiness systems to overlay with like real leaders, because I was trying to build my own representational platform, which is very hard to do in a set of politics that doesn't exist. To represent humanity and systems and machines, I said, okay, so what are the intentions of the machines? What's the intention of the money? Where are we going to elevate humanity? Where are we going to elevate the utilization and integration of machines? How are we going to incorporate this into new systemic involvements across every sector? And it started with re-engaging with ROI. So I wanted to slash ROI, return on investment, because it lost the credibility of representing the very individuals or things or planetary life that it was built for.
Amazing. Amazing. I'm like
and if anyone
fangirling
wants
up
a
here.
simpler discussion on that, I'm happy to break it down. I'm working on that.
It's amazing. I'm fangirling right now. This is awesome.
Oh, so it was a new metric, essentially. So economic issue, new economic measure. How do you introduce that new metric?
Awesome.
Yeah.
So with Women's March, I want to talk a little bit about just women right now and the climate that we're dealing with globally. So it was really interesting because obviously Women's March started with a Facebook post from a grandmother in Hawaii calling on 40 of her friends to go to Washington, D.C. There was a lot more than 40 of us. But it was really interesting to see it expand globally for me. Within 24 hours, I was having women from Switzerland and women from Tokyo, all over the world saying, I want to get involved and I want to have a march as well. And really digging and seeing that they were marching for clean water or their right to education, the scientists in Antarctica marching for their right to continue to protect the climate. It's just been really interesting. And right now, like, I feel like women all over are organizing just naturally in small groups in their communities, and we're trying to brainstorm solutions. We're trying to figure out how we can truly get equality. And I mean, the reality is we can't talk about gender equality if we don't talk about financial independence. And that for me was something really interesting coming in the blockchain space, because it was like a light bulb went off, like, oh my God, like so many of these things are linked to financial inequality. And like even talking about running for office, it's interesting. Like, I mean, you had to fundraise a lot of money, and I don't even know if you were able to fundraise what you needed to run for office. And I know a lot of women right now struggling with that. And you think about, even if we were able to get financial equality, then we could run for positions of power and actually be in charge of creating policy change and legislation change, driving community and vision and things like that. So all that to say is, I feel like right now with movements and decentralized movements like Women's March, March for Our Lives, all these uprisings coming together, but the thing is the nonprofit space especially is usually the last to the table when it comes to tech, even if we are trying to drive social and cultural change. So how do you all think that we can bridge that gap? And I'm even asking this as part of Women's March, like how we can really bring blockchain to these movements.
Just one. It's a really tough question to answer. I myself am trying to figure that out with the foundation forming a nonprofit as well. I'm part of 2 other nonprofits, and just dealing with just money and raising money and knowing where the money goes to is something that our supporters always want to know. So I think that's the biggest where blockchain can make the biggest impact, is showing the transparency in where the money goes. So I know like the Red Cross, they raise so much money, but I think only like 10% of that money goes towards whatever it is that the cause is for. So so transparency and is definitely one of the biggest things that blockchain could be used for.
In terms politically, I actually am having a talk tomorrow in Detroit about blockchain technology in government, and I'm doing it intentionally before the November 6th election, really wanting to make sure that our politicians, our candidates, understand how blockchain technology can be used. And you know, there is always this conversation, it's like, can we raise money using crypto? And that would be an amazing, I think it would be a pretty interesting kind of way of raising money if that was allowed. But I think that right now, personally, I believe hyperlocal education is what's necessary. Before me, no one was really doing that. And so before we can even get into the movements, I think the activists, the people need to understand it, and it takes a while. Crypto doesn't have a really good brand, doesn't have a good reputation right now out in the average real world. You know, people here, we know because we're reading and we know people working in it, but if you just go out in the street, they're like, that Bitcoin, and I don't know, there's a lot of skepticism, there's a loss of trust. So, you know, it really takes a lot of education and to show the different ways that it can be useful for activists within government, outside of government, to empower communities, and then that will help, you know, people to integrate it within their movements.
And I guess just quickly, it brings up a really nice point of focus that crypto and blockchain are different. So in your question, did you want us to have it as a regard for, you know, as a form of money and support in raising funds, blockchain in terms of accountability or protocols for possibility? So, I mean, I will say, having been trickling down from the intelligence and the national security communities, the immediate associations I started having over the last 5 years was digging back into the nonprofits who had a lot of data. I love data and I love accountability of data. You're sitting on all this wealth, go and use it to solve the problems in the communities. Like, you guys are sitting on all this stuff, why can't we use it? So not just the distribution of, or the potentiality to raise funds. So if you're looking at it in the money sense, I had friends working on blockchain protocols and platforms to integrate it into small communities in India. I spent time in Myanmar. You can't bring that in. The women don't trust it. So how do you start having the hyper-localist type of education? That was something I had to bring into nonprofits for their data management, not just in terms of also bringing in funds. So I think it's a very dense question. I'd love to be able to maybe write something after this. Like, it requires a lot of explanation. And then on the second side, for fundraising capacity, because I also have a for-profit and a nonprofit entity, I had to form a PAC in order to raise an agenda around just getting like cybersecurity to be a thing that's accountable, right? So in that terms, I hate raising money. So for instance, my first piece of legislation that I proposed in the state of California, not as a lawyer, not as a public representative, I had to like transfer lobby, don't ask. I bootstrapped it. I went into, it was about legislation around Uber and mapping, public mapping. And I went into the car, I drove for a year, and I used every single penny of earnings, and I put that towards the legislation. I refused to take money from anybody. I mean, I don't now, but much different. So the capacity, do I want to, you know, accept crypto? Do firms want to accept crypto? Coming from a traditional information security background, we used to be just the rebels. So I remember when I started my platform, my dad thought I was an anarchist, and like so did government officials. But, you know, as Lisa had said in the discussion before, it's going to be this balance of the security and a dual offering where there can be this interoperable balance between fiat and the distribution of now crypto that can have extreme power to move things forward. So I took a lot of time on that one.
No, that was great. I feel like, yeah, just to everyone's point, obviously there's a need for more people to get involved and educated in the space. And again, for me, it's like, you know, blockchain is supposed to be solving a lot of these like archaic archaic and corrupt systems that exist, but if the people most impacted by those systems aren't at the table, specifically women and people of color, minorities, it's a huge problem. So how can we continue to bring them to the table, and not just bring them to the table, but actually in positions of power and decision making?
Well, that's one of the initiatives that I have been really passionate about, is getting disenfranchised people to become educated in the space, and also from a financial literate side as well. A lot of people just aren't financially literate, and just having been hosting workshops and boot camps, development boot camps around the world, and helping get people involved. When it comes to development, there aren't very many women who want to be developers right now, but I keep saying that for every one blockchain job, for every one blockchain developer, there's at least 14 to 20 jobs available, and the salary is higher than ever. It's like nearly $200K a year. So if you're looking for a development job, you should go towards learning Solidity and learning blockchain, because it's in high demand, and you have the pick of the crop right now. And so I've been trying to get more women to go to these boot camps and development workshops as much as possible, and helping to sponsor and pay for it. So I keep telling them, I'll pay for it if you want to go. And some people have, in Korea, they've taken me up on it. So far, that's the only place that has been very popular.
That's amazing.
Yeah, in addition to the classes, I think that that's really great. I think we have to remember that the systems are made of people, and it's people who are upholding and making sure that these systems survive.
Yes.
And it's people who are trying to replicate that system within this alternative system. So, one of the things that I think really gets missed is the real hard work that really has to happen if we really want to see some sort of change, to see how blockchain technology and cryptocurrency can help and support communities on a local level. We really have to see people's minds change. And that's the shift of consciousness. That's the hardest thing to do. No one's been able to really do that yet. We haven't been very successful. We've been having women's marches. Kavanaugh was just, made judge. So
we're going to talk about him in just a few minutes.
So it's going to take time, and I'm trying my best to be patient. I'm a very impatient person, hence the reason why I ran for mayor. I very much am really trying to make sure that people understand our current economy and how it functions and its history, which most people do not know, even people in this room right now. And that's a dangerous thing. It's very, very dangerous. So until we understand that, I really think we're moving too fast, actually, within this blockchain world. People just want to make things, and they want to change the world, and they want to, they're rushing into different countries and cities and spaces that they don't belong to, trying to give this thing that they think will save everything, which is a very colonial kind of way of being. And so that colonial mindset has infiltrated, infected this industry already. So as much as I'm trying to educate, I'm also trying to make sure within our industry that we're being very mindful, and we pause. And we have to ask questions and be humble, and to self-check. Self-check our privilege, self-check our mission, and really make sure that is necessary, it's needed, and is this the right way, the right perspective? Is this the right method in which to address whatever needs?
Yeah.
And just to piggyback that, because it's a tremendous point. It's one of the things that I've spent the last 3 years in my firm doing, is just trying to educate people. First, it was like trying to get congressmen to just know what cyber and security are, for instance, not let alone blockchain. And working on, who's voting in the election. You can raise your hands. That should be
Everyone
everybody.
should raise their hands.
If you're a citizen.
Everyone raise. Isn't today the last day to register to vote in California?
Yesterday.
Yeah, well, hope everybody's registered. Actually,
Yes.
I don't actually at the same time, because we don't, not all of the databases are trustable, which I'm going to be the contrarian over here. Well, not really, the devil's advocate is the rollout. It's not just the educating on the public. So a few years ago, I remember being at one, and someone had a brilliant blockchain technology that they were going to roll out to millions of populations, civilian populations, in the lowest, most economically suffering communities. And I was like, where's your educational tool to teach them on what's going to be permanent record? Is there any sort of, so radical transparency is fantastic. However, that will be a tremendous push in the consciousness is, how many people in this room meditate? This is so cool. Oh my God, each room I'm starting to come in, more and more people meditate. How many people have done any insight work, like looking within, going through your preconditioning? Some people call it trauma. Some people call it excitement, personal adventuring. So a lot of people. So when you start coming face to face, the consciousness in the blockchain, I think, is a very good conversation, because the more and more aware of the more and more layers we have, we can start to see the more and more of how we think and feel and are influenced. And so too with our new machine system. So it's not just about integrating this voter project. I want all of California to not have voter boxes anymore, or faulty computational hardware systems. I would love to have them roll out blockchain. I'm spending all the time educating and having to have them. There's the attrition rate of education, investing in the time to understand and trust these systems. But at the same time, you brought in people. So if we look at something that the computer or the blockchain does, actually, how many developers are in the room again? Or there are many. So at the back end, it's data. It's code that talks about something, it's about identity within now the machine. So we talk about marginalized communities. We talk about raising a woman's voice. But inside of a computer and inside of a database, it's a code. It's an identifier. It's a list. To give the code and the data context. So before we start rolling out even blockchains for accountability, we need to start coming up with new base standards for context of our data within the databases and have protocols for interoperability. Is everyone following me? I can break that one. Yeah! Interoperability! Okay.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think that just going back to the community aspect of this, like, for me, it's exciting coming into these spaces, but it's also a little scary because it is moving so quickly. And, I was in Tokyo last week, and there was some discussions just going on of trajectory and where we want to be in a year, 2 years and such. And I was concerned because I'm feeling like a lot of these conversations are happening without this like social justice, human rights lens. And we have to be talking about this actively, everyone in the community. And there is a lot of trauma, there's a lot of pain, and I think that we need to listen, absolutely, because the thing is a lot of communities, again, have been organizing, they've been talking, they've been trying to come up with solutions, and a lot of them already know what needs to happen. And so coming in these spaces and just being like, how can we support you? How can this technology support what you're doing, instead of, throwing answers at you. I remember right after Women's March, going to San Francisco, I won't name the company, but they said, oh, you need to come, and we have this new tech thing that you all will benefit from. And I walk into a boardroom with 12 white men, and I'm like, I can't take this meeting, because like, how can 12 white men look at a women's movement and tell us what we need right now? And I think that one of the things that in this space, we want more women, and we want more diversity, and we want this to become a global thing, because what we've been talking about this whole time is this doesn't work if people aren't using it. Like, we can have all these brainstorms and develop all these things, but unless this is actually accessible to my mom in Detroit or the grandmother in Nebraska, like, she can understand this isn't gonna work. So I think it's really important that we're having these discussions and conversations, but I think that, you know, on the tech end of things as well, it's also equally important to be joining these spaces, listening, and then collaborating and seeing how we can have these solutions together.
Yeah, I think it's really important to point that out, because just from a technological layer, their diversity is so important because of programming biases, you know? So if one type of person is programming, you know, an AI, it's not going to take into account our moms. I really worry about my mom, who's going to be 70. I don't know why I'm crying. I feel like she's going to be left out. I don't know why I'm crying.
Well, you know, my mother, who is turning 70 next year, I mean, I told her about blockchain technology and cryptocurrency, totally taught herself. And I love to use her as an example, because I think oftentimes we were like, they're too old, they're not gonna know, we can't waste time on it. No, actually they have a lot of time on their hands. And
yes, because they're getting, so the population, so the population's getting older. Like, I know my aunt lived till she's 101. Like, my whole family lives till they're 100. So I'm like, oh my gosh, you know. And my mom speaks English, but it's not that great. So I'm really worried. That's why I got to this space, because I wanted to make a difference.
No, yeah.
So, and you are, like, honestly, like, I'm serious, like, you really are, and it's one of those things that your impact, like, you might not be able to see it every day, but, like, you are influencing so many people around the world. Everyone in this room.
Thank you.
Yeah,
so, you know, so I'm working on creating an AI conference in Vietnam in December, and a Women in Blockchain conference in December as well in Vietnam, just to bring it back to my own community, because I'm Vietnamese. But it's just really important, because, you know, the most disenfranchised people are women in these third world countries who aren't banked, who don't have an identity. And a lot of them are sex workers. I worry about that as well, you know.
They don't have bank accounts.
They don't have bank accounts.
A lot of women don't even have a bank account.
Yeah, so, and even talking about that, there's blockchain companies. I just talked to the founder of Intimate this morning. She's in the Philippines, creating their blockchain to help banking for people in the adult industry, so that they can bank, and so also to get rid of shame and trauma around that space as well. So I mean, I think that's huge. Talk about impact, you know, and it's the oldest industry in the world, and people can't bank. So that'll make a huge difference all around the world.
Absolutely. Well, I want to talk a little. Oh, Ingrid, did you want to say something?
Well, I was going to say that, you know, in terms of the bias is really, really important. So as I said before, Detroit's 85% black. The politicians decided to create this initiative called the Green Light Program, which means that a business will have a green light, it's really tacky, but a fluorescent green light, so that the police, who you're already paying with your taxes, will secure that area even more, because you're going to stay open late or be 24 hours. It's Detroit. So one of the things is that they want to institute this kind of technology that, like, basically scans people to see if they're going to be criminals or not. And of course, with a majority black city, that means all of us are. With this technology. So this is, you know, the reason why we really, really have to make sure that our politicians know what's going on, because they can create harm and violence for their own constituents. So it's really important to do that, the AI work and more. That's it.
I'm really like excited to see a black woman in the space. And I get excited every time I see black people in the blockchain space.
Me too.
Because I feel like, honestly, like the community's hurting. It's in a lot of pain. And I talk to a lot of people in the black community that are definitely frustrated, but then they learn about this technology, and it's giving them autonomy in a lot of ways, and it's exciting. But again, they need to be in the space. So I'm so happy you're here.
Yes. I mean, there's quite a few of us, which is really wonderful, in that the ones that are here and that are creating projects that really focus on the African diaspora and strengthening the economic stability within the African diaspora. It was just really, I'm really excited to see how that plays out. But I mean, it's more than just one or two, it's like 6 or 7, and I keep hearing more and more projects that are coming out. So it's happening, and it's, at least Africa is leading the way in this, and so that's that humongous, wonderful continent. But within the United States, we're kind of slow to move into communities of color, but it's happening, and as long as me and so many of my colleagues we're doing the work, and we're very focused on it.
Sloan, yes.
Small chime in. Thank you so much. I really want to commend you guys on your vulnerability and rawness to bring the human equation. As for the work that I get to contribute and some new communities I'm involved in, our work is getting into the human experience, but diving into the machine to hold it accountable, and creating policy and programs that not only elevates democracy, the planet, for most of the human leadership on the planet is trying to exercise forms of democracy, which deals with representational politics, people coming into office. And now that we're actually implementing computers and code, it brings in a complete different fundamental, I use the word contextualization, and we use biases. It's the same form. So it's critical to also regard that the humans, we have the tremendous power to elevate democracy and democratic resiliency by looking at holocratic. Is anyone familiar with holocratic holacracy as a modality? So imagine if, like, we are people. How many people in this room have companies or have designed protocols or have a blockchain platform or crypto? So you're designing something that goes out to new people. So a lot of the work that in political theory that I've written deals with how the platforms you're designing are modern constituency, and you're accountable for these constituencies on top of, let's say, your layers or programs get implemented by a city, a government, a program, an energy distribution, water validity, cement analysis, anything that's going to be any sort of granular use of your platform. So it's going to be critical to be able to not just represent our human sentientness, but the senses of the machine. And I challenge everyone in this room and us who are working on the human, the transition into the second and third generations, or bringing in the new second and third generations, that we have the human power to use democratic rule to exercise holacracy and get inside of the computer, basically. Challenge the computer and do not accept AI takes over.
So I want to talk a little bit about abuse of power. For me, it's actually, I'm going to try not to choke up. I was in DC for 33 days around Kavanaugh, leading the protests that were happening there. You probably saw them on TV, women standing up on chairs and disrupting the hearings. And, it was really traumatic. Like I said, I'm going to try not to cry. It was painful, though, because you're seeing the people on the front lines that shouldn't have to be there. And you're seeing people like Adi Barkan that is dying from ALS, like literally spending his last days in DC at Hart Senate, like leading a protest when he should be at home, like on a beach with his family, enjoying his last moments. And you're seeing, the single mothers that, they're depending on access to health care. And you're seeing women that depend on their birth control to be able to live and survive. And you're seeing, again, just the most effective people in this space, and it didn't matter in a lot of ways. It felt like in the moment, because he still was confirmed, but at the same time, it did matter because we won in so many ways, because we were able to just come together, especially women, and really make a stand and just say, look, like this abuse of power's up. You know, if you continue to support these abusive practices and these patriarchal ways, that's fine, then we're gonna vote you out. Your days are numbered. Like, and we actually raised almost $4 million to fund Susan Collins' opponent. Because we're like, if you vote yes on Kavanaugh, then we're gonna vote you out in November. But it really got me thinking a lot just about, and we were there before Dr. Ford even came forward. But obviously, once she did, that really changed the whole conversation for all of us. I mean, we already knew this guy was no good, but then on top of that, to see again, and I believe Dr. Ford, to see somebody that is a serial abuser sitting on the highest court, making that final decision on a split court, affecting things like Roe v. Wade, Brown versus Board, everything on the line with immigration rights and such. It was really difficult to see that. And I feel like women especially were really helpless in that moment, and it made me feel like that sinking feeling I had after the election, and that's what fueled the Women's March for all of us. And you know, now that Kavanaugh's been confirmed, again, like, we're witnessing abuse of power at its finest. We tried to be silenced, and they still are trying to censor us in a lot of ways. Protesters, first were liberal snowflakes, and now we're the angry mob. I don't know when that happened, but somewhere in between there. But I think about, even, again, as all this pain's coming up, and just trauma, especially, it's triggering, because you're seeing women for 33 days share their stories of why they're there, and share their stories of abuse, particularly in the workplace. And you know, I think about blockchain technology, and even if that's implemented in the workplace, like what that could mean, like blockchain-based payroll. For me, I come from the restaurant industry, so I even think about a server that maybe a restaurant operated on blockchain, where she didn't have to depend on tips to make a living. So she didn't have to put up with abuse from a customer because she's counting on that tip at the end of the night. I think about what it could mean for a woman in an abusive relationship. You know, again, we talk about how a lot of women around the world don't even have a bank account. For them to be able to have secure transactions and to be able to be liberated from their abuser potentially. So in this era of just Me Too and Time's Up, as these conversations are happening, you know, from the blockchain perspective, how do you all feel like these conversations can come together? Because I think it's really important right now.
So I want to actually just thank you. The work that you do really speaks, and it moves everything forward. And the work that I do is taking these notions of, again, the human side, and seeing how are they manipulated or not being interwoven into, let's say, privacy policies, data rights, activations, interface, the things that we touch and look at every single day, onboarding. So in terms of abuse of power, a lot of time I spend is also in the advocacy and lobbying space. How many people sign on to terms and conditions? Again, everyone in this room, please just raise your hand. Like, I think that we're in silence because we know that we don't read them. Who reads it besides me? And I'm not a lawyer. How many people worry about like big data, metadata? You can complain and whine about it, but do you actually know what you're complaining and whining about? Yeah. So the example of the waitress who's dependent on tips. So something fun that I just did again is I got back in the car and I went on, my new car doesn't allow me to pick up human passengers, so I am limited to eats. So imagine if I had I think it's funny, I challenge you for one full day to stress your legs for 12 hours and go in the car and pick up food and bring it to someone's door. That's an abuse of power. There's no opt-in for someone to choose if they want to go to a door. It's a risk. I feel at risk all the time. And I had to, I have a consultancy, so I push the limit to change these things now. And I also work in the public advocacy space to also change policy to reflect human rights. But the Uber is just one small case study. You would never think that someone's validity of decentralized, democratized earning would be ever violated by terms of service that they would ever sign on to. Or that your decentralized data in many different layers of collected insights could be the new modern violation and abuses of freedoms and individuality. So I challenge this discussion to ground ourselves into the triggered trauma, the knowing of the becoming and moving forward, and also see that we have tremendous power today to take back our power holocratically, to understand and reflect these in the terms of service, privacy agreements, to start propelling human rights forward through our data contracts and our interfaces of our apps.
Dope. So continuing on the vein of empowerment, in Detroit right now, 40% of Detroiters are living without access to internet. And the reason is because the internet companies look at the credit score of the entire area. And because of the housing crisis, of course, the housing score is not that great, and you already heard my poverty statistics. So they either will give you internet at a very low speed but a higher cost, or you don't have access at all. So there is the Equitable Internet Initiative that launched last year, and they are working in three of the lowest income neighborhoods in Detroit, and they are creating a mesh network. And basically that's putting a satellite on one house, and then maybe a couple houses over, a block or so over, there's another satellite, you bounce the signal, and people in the area have access to Wi-Fi. And so that is a nonprofit initiative that is actually slowly and quickly coming towards the end of their budget. So just a FYI, they're trying to raise money. Equitable Internet Initiative, they were interviewed by Vice. Please look them up. Please donate if you can. So EOS Detroit wants to support this initiative by creating a DAC, a Decentralized Autonomous Community, that will support the mesh network so people can not only be able to pay for the internet, even though it's a low cost, but they will be able to receive money. But then also will be, just creating an alternative economy based on that. So it's supporting something that we absolutely need. So we're talking about all these apps, and we want people to be developers and things of that sort. Well, I have friends who are teaching and in various neighborhoods about coding, but when the kids, they learn, they go home, they can't practice. So by the time they go back to class, they have to start all over again. Digital literacy is extremely, extremely important. And I'm going to get emotional, but I'm very afraid our babies are going to be left behind, and I'm being very specific. Black babies, brown babies are going to be left behind. We're already behind. Please understand that the average Black American family is already 228 years behind the average white American family economically. So we have a lot of challenges here. And so the only way to leapfrog 228 years in my mind is through digital literacy and hopefully participating in this alternative economy that we're creating. This is super, super important to me. Because if we really want this world where we're interacting and we're loving on each other and the Kavanaughs in the world don't actually make it to judge, then, we got to make sure that everyone's on the same playing field, and that they not only feel empowered, but are actually empowered, and have the tools to navigate this world. And digital literacy is key. So the Mesh Network Equitable Internet Initiative, please donate. Please help that out as we are at EOS Detroit.
How do we donate? How do we donate?
How's it going?
No, how do we donate?
Yeah, it's online. You just have to Google them because unfortunately they're under a company that's their fiscal agent, that's under another thing. They're a little buried. They might need, some of the marketing teams that were up here before. But Equitable Internet Initiative, they're on GoFundMe, so you can find them there.
I want to just add to that. So we talk a lot, especially as women, just about how equal pay and how we're not paid as much, and a lot of statistics are thrown around, but a lot of those statistics are for white women and black women, Latinx women, indigenous women. It's way less, and actually black men make less than white women as well. So again, we can't be talking about building a better financial economy and financial equity unless we have these communities not just at the table, but actively building it alongside in executive positions as well.
Yeah, I'm very big, and I don't want passive consumers. I want people to not only participate, but be innovators.
Absolutely.
And it takes time to get to that point, but it's important.
And I think it definitely all starts with you. You can go and encourage your friends and your colleagues to step up, just like the Cyber Code twins have. They've stepped up and keep telling everyone else to step up. I've encouraging every woman I come across to get into the space because this is the new era of wealth creation, and I'm passionate about us not getting left behind. No woman gets left behind.
We can't, yeah.
No Asian person gets left behind. No blue-haired person gets left behind. And no one gets left behind. So, that's why we share in this all the time. And I definitely want to go back to abuse of power because when it starts at the top and people are seeing that it's okay for someone to abuse and still get voted into a high position of power, it trickles down. It trickles down into people bullying, and that's not okay. I myself have been dealing with death threats and bullying on Telegram. Again, we hate Telegram, right? We talked about that earlier. I think it's a great platform, but it's not doing anything to protect its users. I've had to deal with protecting users within my own Women in Blockchain Foundation group who've all come to me about bullying. And they're people who are bullying and doing things that are not okay just because they know how to use technology. And that all is because they've seen it over and over that nothing is going to be done. So I think it's within us to keep stepping up and not letting this happen. So from voting, use your power to vote, and then being an example. So if you see someone bullying, step up for them. So it's...
Yeah. I just want to also contribute. We're all part of a decentralizing movement, which, again, if we're talking about the tenets of a new movement, a new time, we have to talk about the tenets of self-governance. So everyone in this room probably has gone through bullying, and tremendous bullying, and death threats are so serious, and trauma is so serious. But in an era of self-governance, if cyberpunks are punking on you, punk back. If coding is if hackers are hacking, hack back or learn. Get resilient. So I think I'm going to poo-poo that one. I love you, but I'm going to poo-poo it because it's a time to get resilient. Self-governance means you have to be accountable for you too.
I have, by the way, because I've gone through lots of different ways. But when someone, so that's the same. I'm saying on Telegram, it's very hard to find where someone is. Not to say
it's not scary. I'm not.
Oh no, no, I'm not personally scared. But having taking responsibility for literally dozens of people coming to me for help. Mm-hmm. and trying to help them. I'm only one person. I can't be a one-person vigilante, which I've become. I've been stalking my own stalker. and it's been really hard. They have a lot of ways to keep coming after people, and I haven't been able to stop it. So if anybody here, and I've been talking to top cybersecurity people, and they can't stop it either.
It's about the ripple. We're talking about consciousness and the movement and influence and moving forward and ethics and kind of the softness is like, how do we kind of release the anger? How do we fight back and go back, and also maybe go into saying like, well, how do we train better citizens and better individuals? That's every time in every day of work I'm in is like, how do we have just people that are just better? Not better to say like they're yes, no, good or bad. I don't think good or bad exists. It's a binary that shouldn't exist. But it's, how do we say, like, it's with the Kavanaugh example as well. You know, he doesn't have to fess up to something he may or may not remember, but he can say, maybe I have been involved in this. And maybe can give permission for other people too to start understanding small actions that we have every day. Humans react to things and we start learning. I don't know, I think I have a big wish for humanity, but I think there's accountability to be more resilient within ourselves and have the self-knowledge to know that we can at least be accountable for how we're acting.
Right, and accepting responsibility too, I think is a big thing. Like, again, there's a lot of trauma, and it's come up a lot during this discussion, but I think that we've all been guilty in some way, shape, or form, and may not even realize how, but the biggest thing, just bringing it back to what you just said, because I deal with that a lot as well, and I feel like when you're a strong woman with impact, you're often seen as a threat. But this is where, I mean, just to wrap this up, this discussion, I really want to bring it back to the men in the room. So again, first of all, thank you for staying for this discussion, because the last couple blockchain discussions I've been a part of, a third of the men have walked out and left. So thank you for still being here. But I also just want to just say to the men in this room, like, you've heard a lot of vulnerability, and I think that these are also just ways where you can be a better ally. I have a lot of men come up to me and especially after Kavanaugh, being like, I don't even know what to do. Like, I'm frozen. Like, I'm devastated. What can I do as a man? And I think that, obviously, like what Fu just said, when you witness abusive behavior or abusive power, speak up and say something, because oftentimes it is from another man, and we could literally say the exact same thing, but if you say it as a man to man, you probably are going to get a much better response. So that's like the first thing I think that's super helpful. And again, like, second thing, for the men in this room that are in positions of power, like, also too, again, remember to put women in those positions of power as well. Put us on your boards, give us funding, and trust us as well when we do offer suggestions. A lot of times it is coming from a place of experience as well, where we've dealt with that or witnessed someone else that has dealt with something, so we do have a lot of insight to offer. So just final thoughts from everybody. What would you like to say to the men in this room and how they can be better allies, especially in the blockchain space?
Oh, we don't get any questions from the audience?
Questions from the audience?
I'm curious.
We only have 3 mics, so I'm going to grab one from you. But let's do a couple of questions. We probably have just a few minutes for questions. Did someone want to add something, though, first? Were you going to say something and then I cut you off?
No, I'll wait for questions.
Okay. I saw Matt's hand.
Hi, everyone. First, I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing everything that you all shared. Thank you for being here. Thank you for putting this on. So I think just the current political environment is so charged with so much tension. And I think from a white man's perspective, we also feel very attacked right now. In a lot of ways, our reputations are suffering from the Me Too movement, and sometimes unjustly. And I think that it's important to recognize on both sides that the reaction to anger and to kind of weaponization of the political situation that we're in and the back and forth. I think it's important to recognize that is also making people on the other side feel unsafe. And I'm wondering how we can, as a community, elevate the conversation and avoid this kind of back and forth and this kind of punitive justice and move toward more of a restorative justice. And, you know, particularly for someone that has my errors, but you know, it feels very unsafe to be a white man in some ways. And
I'm sorry.
It sounds.
I'm sorry. Please break it. Are you really saying that to us? Are you? I know, that's our world every day, every moment, every day. I think one of the things, it's valid though. I don't want to negate your...
Thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you.
We have compassion for you and empathy because we know how it feels.
But yes.
Crypto and blockchain or masculine and feminine?
Well, I think...
It's both.
I think that this is important. This is important. So I've been hearing a lot of men saying that they're attacked, and white men, you know, you're the center of this fucking world. Please understand that. So I understand. That any criticism can feel unusual because you're not used to it. That's your privilege. You're in a privileged space. And so now it's the process of really unpacking that. And this is where the work begins. Listen to what's happening and rest in that. And that's why I was talking about this self-reflection. That is the part of your liberation as a white man. Because right now, you're imprisoned by patriarchy and white supremacy. So I think it's really important to take this moment and feel it. And then think about over the millions and millions of people who feel unsafe every day of every moment. As a black woman, it's rare that I feel just completely safe. So now you're getting just a taste. You're just getting like not even like just a tip of what, you know, a person like me or Fu or like anybody who is marginalized is feeling on a daily basis. On a daily basis, okay? So, and the reason this does relate to blockchain and crypto, because you could be putting that energy into what you're creating. And so that's why I'm asking you to do that work. Ask your friends and colleagues to do that work. Also, one of the things for sure, please don't ask the victim to teach the oppressor, okay? Please do the work so that you can teach each other and you can talk to each other. I know that you're probably gonna need help, but Google, there's too many articles and books written to help you. Read and understand your history. Understand your history. And when you do that, that is gonna make the entire freaking world better. Because right now, men, and especially white men, are catalysts of a lot of pain and violence because they're not understanding the system in the same way that marginalized communities are, because we have a very intimate, up-close understanding of the system and how wrong it is. But it's so right for you, especially if you're cis and hetero. So, this is a really good moment for you. Enjoy the journey. I wish you luck. Lots of love.
Sloan, did you want to add on to that?
Also, just going on that, if we think back to there's a word, landlocked. And the deep masculine narrative is locked in land. And if we're in this room talking about decentralization in a digitization capacity, so digital, online, spreading things, new currency that isn't physical, paper, tangible, we are already rising into feminine by not even going into the shaming that goes back. It's a tale as old as time, you know? Like, so, you know, Matt, you're involved in a lot. So I would love to have that holacratic accountability conversation with you to see how you're bringing in that. And to reflect in silence is sometimes quite nice because you can see more from the other side of it. But I'd like to just raise that notion of land. So if we're going to not be propensing these deep-rooted things of expansionism, ideologies, ownership, and pride that goes back into where we're from, we can start looking about how we can evolve the humanism through the digitization of data and goods.
Thank you, Sloan. I'm going to end this with one last question. I was super curious to learn more, Sloan, about what you were just doing in Korea, because I saw your face plastered all over every technology or system that we had, and you were the only female in a sea of men. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, what you were just doing in Korea?
Hail to the yeah, sister. I will tell everybody in this room that I have generally always been the only woman in the room. And some of you guys know, you've heard me talk, like I went in front of the heads of American federal intelligence agencies, 3, 4-star generals, even though I wasn't invited, and I took the mic and stood up. And I remember, thank you. And I stood up and asked them how I can help them, even though I don't know if I So in Korea, this was while some of our friends and audience participants were just in Japan. I was invited and honored actually to participate in the World Knowledge Forum, particularly in the city of Busan in South Korea, to present successful conditions of smart cities. I'm an intelligence domains expert, which means I just look at like people and signals in our systems and I try to see if they're cooperating culturally. So in Korea, oh my God. I want to thank the Korean people for having the audacity to have a woman who's newly 30 go on their stage with no PhD, no master's degrees. I barely graduated from 3 colleges. Tests, I wrote whatever I wanted in the boxes, and I built everything from the ground up and the penny up, and they allowed me to be on stage, honored by the chairman of the largest business newspaper in all of South Korea, to present viable protocols and solutions for cooperation, and it was the biggest thing I think publicly I've done. Again, I do a lot in the background. It's awesome, and I woke up and I was on the Korean newspapers. In the Korean news.
Congratulations, that's incredible. So we're gonna wrap this up. Ladies, thank you so much for joining and talking with us about this important conversation.
Thank you so much.
Another round of applause for Brianne Butler, Food Styles, Ingrid LaFleur, and Sloan Trugman. Thank you,
Really
ladies.
quick, I just want to say one last thing, because I don't talk unless there's an action item. So our action item today, if you're a man in this room, first of all, make sure you are being inclusive to women and people of color in your space. And if you are already, I have men come up to me I'm the only guy, I hired only women and women are on my board, that's amazing, great. To take that a step further, don't just have your own space be inclusive, also challenge other spaces to be inclusive as well. Next time you're going to a meeting or coming up with a partnership, also challenge and look at those structures and make sure that they're being built inclusively. Because everybody in this room cares about the future. And again, we can't talk about building a better future unless we have the people most impacted at the table.
Thank you.